As the third guest in Aalto University's Fashion in Helsinki seminar, we will hear from Anja Aronowsky Cronberg. She is the founder and editor-in-chief of Vestoj magazine, as well as a senior research fellow in fashion theory and practice at the London College of Fashion. Started in 2009, Vestoj stands apart from most other fashion periodicals because of its bold intellectual stance. The journal includes both scholarly texts about fashion as well as fiction, interviews, poetry, and visuals. Vestoj contains, however, very few photographs and no advertising, which is unusual for a fashion publication. Anja is someone who takes fashion very seriously, but without forgetting humor and glamour. I'm so happy to be talking to her today. Anja, you put out my absolute favorite fashion magazine. Why did you want to start a publication that looks at fashion very differently to, say, the Vogue or, insert any fashion glossy there?
Well, I mean, the answer is kind of contained in the question a little bit, because I think that, I mean, let's say I had my personal reasons, and then I had my strategic reasons. My personal reasons had to do with coming from a background in research and academia and design history, and realizing that there was no cross for that knowledge and wealth of research going into the industry. And also realizing, in fact, that researchers didn't really have, at least 10 years ago, and among I'm adding caveats here because I'm generalizing, but I felt a lot of the fashion researchers that I was in touch with didn't necessarily have any direct relationship to the industry or personal relationships to people in the industry. And anyway, so I saw like these two ivory towers, if you like, and not a lot of bridges going in between them. So Vestoj was an attempt to do that, to create liaisons, to build bridges. And then I think I also felt very much, and still kind of feel, that fashion publishing, fashion mainstream publishing tends to be quite formulaic. I think partly that's to do with having to follow the rhythm of an industry that you rely on for content, for advertising. But it means that not just are you quite limited in what and how you can write about things, but also you get trapped a little bit, I think, in who you feature, how I don't know, how you engage with entertainment culture, how even the language that you use really to write about fashion. And so I could see that if or as there was a kind of unlimited supply of magazines writing in a very similar way about fashion, and then there was like nothing beyond that I could find. And so Vestoj in that sense became, I didn't want it to be, I didn't want Vestoj to be a vanity project, if you like. A lot of times fashion publishing ends up becoming a little bit, maybe I'm a bit harsh saying vanity project, but because a lot of times image agencies or consultant, or how do you say, like creative studios have put independent magazines out there in order to partly just show, if you work with a lot of clients, having your own magazine outlet for your own creativity and view of the world, but it also becomes a calling card to get more of those commercial clients. But if you work like that, my feeling was that the magazine becomes more about you than it becomes about what's needed in fashion publishing, if you like. And so with Vestoj, I was trying to answer a call of what I and my peers, let's say, felt was needed in fashion publishing. More focus on text, you know, that's important as well, because Vestoj a lot of emphasis on writing, as you were pointing out as well in your lovely intro. Thank you.
I suppose when you first started out, you probably had to spend a fair amount of time explaining to people what you're trying to do, since you were doing something that really wasn't done at that point. Has it gotten any easier? Do people now like understand your project?
It has gotten easier, absolutely. And oh my God, I still remember the embarrassment I felt, you know, for years at the beginning, you know, trying to convince people that, you know, my project was worthwhile and valid. And by people, I mean pretty much exclusively industry professionals, because in the academic world, I always felt Vestoj to be very welcomed and also necessary, because academic journals are also very formulaic, and scholars don't necessarily have a lot of well, kind of, you know, going back to what I was saying earlier, a lot of opportunity to reach industry people. And so, whereas in academia, I felt a lot of enthusiasm and very quickly, you know, invitations to conferences and just general kind of interest and buzz, which is also how I, some years after starting Vestoj, became part of the research department at London College of Fashion. But the industry doesn't have a lot of time for things that don't operate by known codes, let's say. And so, you know, also because the industry is so full of gatekeepers, you know, it means that in order to reach, let's say, a designer that I perhaps wanted to interview or find out about a brand, you know, in terms of, you know, how do you say, like knowledge beyond the heavily mediated or kind of official story, I had to just, you know, do legwork, go around, present my work, like a lot of times to people who, you know, who looked bored, didn't have the time or didn't want to take the time, who, you know, looked at Vestoj and immediately, you know, I could see kind of put it to the side, and I knew that they would never be picking that up again. And that was hard. Of course it was hard. I mean, it was hard for my confidence. And it was frustrating because I knew that my project was good in terms of like high quality, you know, not unnecessary. But then I think at some point I learned a couple of tricks along the way. For instance, I learned really how important it was for me to take the time to ask for a meeting with someone, a personal meeting, you know, so that I could do my best to charm this person, do my best to engage this person, and listen to this person as well, no, to understand what is interesting for him or her, what might appeal to him or her in what I'm doing, you know, and I think also a few other tricks in terms of learning how to appeal to someone who has little time in the industry and whom I was depending on for something, you know. I needed them, but they didn't need me, you know. So I had to, you know, figure out what made them tick, you know, and putting a solid advisory board, which, you know, which was an opportunity to put a few status names, let's say, like on my advisory board. It had to do with using a particular aesthetic language that felt high production value, that felt, how do you say, like, that wasn't, that was high concept, but also just beautiful and tactile, and like to create an object that was appealing. And I think once I, you know, as it often happens, one door opens, then another, then, you know, as time goes on, because a lot of, mostly I think, if you have a project that's good, you know, a lot of what the work beyond that is about stamina, you know, just being around long enough so that so that word can spread organically, you know, through word of mouth. And I think for the kind of work that I do with Vestoj, which doesn't rely on social media, where there is no PR agency involved, or no, you know, marketing budget or anything like that. Word of mouth is the most effective and most important way, and I think also probably most fitting way to to kind of spread the word of what I'm doing, because I think Vestoj is a platform that requires time from the reader, that it requires a certain curiosity and interest already. You know, I don't know that I'm necessarily you know, convincing anybody, or seducing anybody, at least not in according to the codes that fashion publishing or the industry would normally use.
I think anybody involved in any sort of creative pursuit can identify with that sort of legwork that you've had to do.
Still have to do, mind you,
Yeah.
still have to do, because it's like I got a little bit lazy for a while, and started focusing much more. And I suppose in a way it was necessary for me as well, to spend some time really focusing on the content of a story, and finding brilliant writers, in honing my own research skills, and trying to figure out how to make to bring the journal to the point where I wanted it to be. But I also realized that I kind of neglected the legwork aspect, and you have to do both. You know, if you work on your own, as I do, you just have to be your own everything, right?
The other day I was watching a lecture by Agnes Varda, in which she talked about the 3 key words of her film practice, which were inspiration, which you need in the beginning, there's creation, the hard work of doing it, and then sharing. And I find that there's such a spirit of generosity to Vestoj in some sense. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the significance of sharing for you, whether it's in the context of Vestoj's event series, or sharing the thinking of your colleagues in the academia in an approachable way.
I love this question also because I don't know that I'm very good at sharing. So I think I'm really bad at sharing, actually. Like sometimes I think if I was better at sharing, I'd be able to share my workload with others. I wouldn't be so goddamn like, how do you say, like territorial about my own work and my ideas. And you know, with Vestoj, I've tried to work in lots of different ways with others, you know, beyond just having someone who contributes to a journal, or to an event, or to Vestoj Online. But I've so far kind of always failed. But given, you know, having said that, I now, for example, have um, an art director, a couple of, you know, an art director studio, Studio Blanco, who I have actually managed to work really well with, because I am, you know, I'm gotten myself to the point where I can trust what they do. Because I think a really hard thing for me at the beginning was to trust that others wanted their work to be as good as I wanted their work to be. So I was always sticking, you know, meddling and sticking my fingers in, and sort of trying to micromanage to my own detriment. So in a way, it's like, I think I've gotten a bit better at sharing, but I also have come to accept that Vestoj, I don't know that Vestoj will be able to be everything that I, on the one hand, would like it to be, because I, on the other hand, have this intense need to be in charge of the creative process. And so with every issue, for instance, that I work on, or with every event that I work on, I'm very, how do you say, like, I have a very clear vision of what I want the end result to be. And so with a journal, for example, you know, we work to these big themes. Now, the one that I'm working or finishing at the moment is on doubt. And so with a theme like doubt, typically I do lots of research myself. I come up with the backbone of the issue. I have a pretty clear idea of the writers that I would like. Image making, I stay out of now because Studio Blanca do it way better than I ever could. And of course, with the writers, it doesn't always work out. A lot of times, you know, I have, you know, alternative B, C, D, E, F, you know, whatever. So, and certain things also emerge organically, but the end result doesn't usually end up very far from what I imagined it to be like. So I think the element of sharing that you're asking about, I mean, in a way, like I have seen the events or Vestoj salons, as I've called them, to be a way of doing that, because it's, I think an event is a lot more reliant on the audience feedback, on audience participation. And most of the events that I've done only come alive in a way when there is when they are in front of an audience and there is a feedback from the audience that informs the event itself. Events are, you know, have been ways for me to, I mean, first to work with actors, for example, because a lot of the events are kind of performative or performances, or kind of different ways of trying to conceptualize, I don't know, a take on fashion and doubt, let's say, or whatever the theme might be. And suddenly, because writing and publishing, it's at least for someone like me who maybe works more the way I imagine perhaps a fine artist might work than perhaps, you know, the way a regular more traditional publisher might work. Like, you know, since I don't have a team, and since I don't necessarily know how the work that I put out in the world is perceived, you know, and since I don't necessarily know what appeals to readers, what is a success, and which part of which articles or which approaches maybe resonate less with the audience, I think events have been such a amazing way to get a sense. You see on people's faces if things resonate, or if people are on their phones and zone out, or in a way giving talks is another way of sharing, to bring to like teaching is a way of sharing, and having conversations or interviews or what have you, kind of like what we're doing now, is also a way of sharing.
Absolutely. I think the key question at this point remains, you mentioned the new issue on doubt that you're working on. When does it come out? When will we get it?
September is the idea.
I think we will thank you for taking the time to answer these questions and share with us. And we will run to the bookshop in September latest, and follow the website until then. I'm sure there will be something new on the website.
Of course, yeah. The website is meant to be a weekly update, though sometimes I forget, and it happens a bit more seldomly than that. But yes, I mean the issue on that will be out in September, and then I'm still kind of, I have eventually the issues. I mean, they are limited run, they sell out, but I have on Capital, which is the current one, on authenticity, which actually was an issue I really liked working on. This was from a few years ago. Those ones are still around. So
A
you
tip.
can run 2 times. You can run once to the computer, and you can run a second time to the bookshop in September.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you.